transformational coach development session. Hey, welcome everybody. It is so great to have you all here. Mr. Lamont is cheers to you too, sir. Cheers. Nice to see you. I have so many emails with you and I've never actually seen your face. Anyway, welcome everybody. We are so delighted to have you all here. Mr. Les Gramantik, Derek Hansen, Larry Steinke, and Mike Van Tighem. We're really looking forward to this session tonight, this culmination of our coach development series. The session is being recorded. You're welcome to keep your cameras on. If you have questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat, although I suspect there will be a Q&A at the end of this for our fantastic coaches this evening. The talent optimization program, we have to say thanks to them for helping us pull this off and collaborating with us and sponsoring this event. We don't have another upcoming coach development session right away, but we do have an athlete session next week. We're going to have Eric Lutz, Malachi Murray, and Sage Watson join us for the athlete session. So it's going to be a real good one, and we'll be talking about preparing for the summer. So sign up online. Of course, it'll be in the newsletter, and it'll be kicking around on all our social channels. So over to you, Carmen. Let's get this show on the road.
All right, thanks, Beth, and aloha, everyone. Welcome to our fifth and final webinar, at least of this particular coach development series. Tonight's talk is called Quarantined Coaches Corner, and we have all four of our previous guest speakers with us tonight. No doubt we will all be well informed and entertained as a result of tonight's event. To begin with, I just want to say to you guys, thanks so much for sharing with us your time and your expertise. Your words of wisdom have really meant a lot and have been much appreciated. And you've allowed us all to think outside of our bubbles, at least during this pandemic. On a personal note, I have greatly enjoyed reconnecting with each of you, and I look forward to more fun times ahead when we're able to get together in person once this lockdown is lifted and we can return to a new normal. Now, speaking of the new normal, here's the 5 takeaways that from your presentations that I have, and then you can feel free to jump in and add the other ones that you might think are important. First of all, traditional periodization does not work during a pandemic. We can't start at the last meet of the year and work backwards and plan our seasons because especially last fall, we had no idea when our last meet was going to be and how to plan it backwards. So all we can do is start with the athletes we have now, like in terms of their fitness level, and move forward. Whereas Derek coined it to pandemic periodization. And in a way, I was thinking, it's kind of like the Bondarchuk system, but we'll save that for another webinar on a different time. Moving forward with the athletes, the main thing we have to focus on is intensity. And we have to be careful not to do too much too soon, even though the athletes are just biting at the bit to get back at things, but we have to be careful in terms of injury prevention. The pandemic has provided us an opportunity to work on the little things, some things that perhaps may have been neglected during the regular year that may have to do with injury prevention, maybe nutrition, maybe sports psychology. But yeah, it's been an opportunity for working on things that sometimes get neglected. The pandemic has also taught us to be more adaptable, that we have to be ready for a variety of different situations because we don't really know what's going to happen. So we have to kind of go with the flow, not get stressed out, and just be ready for whatever comes our way. And last but not least, the pandemic has reminded us to be more present and for us to reassess our priorities. So is there anything else that you guys want to add before we move on into a new direction? Okay, we'll take that as a no, and we'll move forward. All right, so I have a few questions to ask, and then hopefully those that are attending will start typing some in too, and we'll add those as we go along. But and some of the questions I'll ask all 4 of you, and other ones maybe just I'll pick 1 or 2 of you to answer that particular question. But first of all, the pandemic has afforded us all this some more free time that would have otherwise been spent coaching. We now had on our hands. So I'm curious to know what you guys have done with your free time, and has the pause on normal life been an opportunity for you to, improve in either personal or professional development? Let's start with Larry.
Thanks, Carmen. Probably the, sorry, what was the question? No, I'm kidding.
What have you been doing with your time?
Yeah, so most of my time has been spent doing one of three things pretty much. One, trying to do professional development on my own, find and communicate and get contact with as many others as I can to keep in the loop. The other aspect is something I should have spent a lot more time doing previously, which is me time, getting out to the mountains, still cycling, hiking, snowshoeing, etc. And I think that's been a good unwind. You don't realize when you're doing 10 to 12 hours a day of training, back-to-back sessions throughout the day, starting at 6 in the morning and ending at 7 or 8 o'clock at the night, you don't realize just how much of your time is being eaten up by people who are dependent on you for that time. So that's been the biggest thing, and it was the most notable change probably within about the first couple of weeks. So yeah, that's probably been the biggest thing for me, is just the amount of time that I've been able to spend on myself instead of others.
All right, good for you. And don't forget to mention your photography.
Yeah, I've much more time to spend on my photography than I used to have, that's for sure. And that's been a rather cathartic part of that time being in the mountains as well, for sure.
Yeah, so if you guys haven't already checked it out, either on Instagram or Facebook, go to Lars Photography and see some really awesome shots. So yeah, anyway, good stuff. I've quite enjoyed that. All right, Derek, what have you been doing with your free time?
Probably been coaching my kids, because nobody else is doing that, and maybe people like Les can attest to this, but I think I do a better job than some other people coaching my kids after going through everything and looking at them going, okay, let's fix this. So that's what I've been spending more time doing, is like actually helping my kids. And we've been doing that with schoolwork too. Some of their teachers suck, so we gotta step it up there. So yeah, do it yourself. That's the theme of COVID. So
all right.
I don't know. I was to some of those practices with Les and Les Jr., and I'm not sure that Les Jr. would necessarily agree with you on some of that.
Thanks for bringing it up. You're right, though.
All right, Les, what have you been doing with your free time?
Well, due to the isolation, I finished 3 books on weekend, and believe me, it's a lot of coloring. No, what I actually, seriously, I did have some time that I didn't have other time, the connection with the European Athletic Conference, and I listened to some really good presentations from Europe, and then some I would highly recommend if you get access to it. It's excellent. Phil Graham-Smith on the long jump, horizontal jumps, and Beringer on overall. No, it's just good stuff. I did a lot of work on putting some industrial quantities of circuit workouts. I like those ones, just drawings and putting together, and kind of a punishment kind of workouts, right? Make when athletes look at it like, holy Christ, why did they do it to me? Okay, so I do that kind of a stuff. It's a free time, so I can sit around in my little cocoon, as you can see behind me, and I can just do some method to madness, I call it. But I think it was definitely help. No, it didn't help, no, because I don't enjoy isolation. But I was to do some reading, do some neuroscience stuff, and I read a book again, How We Decide by John Lehner. It's an amazing book, very, very worth reading if anybody get hold of it. Okay, it's bordering neuroscience, and some of you might have read it already, so it's good. So that's what I was doing, and coloring, of course.
Oh yeah, all right. Mike, how about you? Have you been doing any coloring?
Well, coloring is very therapeutic, but I'm not very good at it, so it just stresses me out. So I don't do it. But probably the most retired from my day job out of the group, what I really found was the COVID restrictions kind of had a minimal impact on my daily routine. I'm kind of remember getting a call quite early on from Bruce Deacon saying, for us extroverts, this is really, really tough. And I thought, gee, I'm not really that much of an extrovert then, because I haven't noticed a lot of change and I kind of like it. So it seems I've spent most of my life getting ready for this pandemic and its lifestyle, and running, reading, communicating with athletes, golf or cross-country skiing, depending on the season, yard work. I don't know, I seem to run out of time each day, and I don't feel like I'm busy or anything. But in fact, I found several times at the beginning of the pandemic, I was almost sort of shocked into realizing that COVID was actually a thing in Summerland. I'd only notice I go shopping and all of a sudden there'd be these tense people wearing masks or not wearing masks in the grocery stores and dodging each other. And, I'd go back home and be like, okay, business as usual. But all that being said, I've done a few webinars, which I'd never done before. So that was it's been fun. It's been really interesting. And then allowed me to connect with a lot of people that I normally wouldn't have connected with. I've also had probably more contact with other coaches on a deeper level, since we can't see each other directly at meets. And a lot of times that's just a little chit chat and you move on. But here we're all dealing with the same stuff. So for a lot of distance coaches have had a lot more contact and a lot more exchange of ideas. And since the 2 1/3 athletes that I coach are in different cities, we already had a routine of phoning, texting, WhatsApp, internet contact. That was kind of our routine anyways. So this took away a lot of ways my chance I tried to go to Calgary once a month to work with the girls one-on-one, and that did cut into that, unfortunately. But as far as the technology end of it goes, we pretty much had to do that before.
All right. Okay, one more question I'll ask all of you, and then I'll split it up a bit. But is there anything new that you've new habit, new hobby that you've discovered during this pandemic period that you plan on continuing even after the lockdown's lifted and we're all back to the new normal?
Yeah.
Well, the new habit I have is that I learned that the panda feeds 12 hours a day nonstop. And man on land also feeds 12 hours a day. And so that's why I call it pandemic. So I have to, you guys also culture. No, I haven't done, I ate a lot more. My body's getting bigger. That's no good.
All right, so eating. Okay. All right, Larry, anything new that you're gonna carry on?
Yeah, I think the new part is I'm hoping to carry through once we start up, which we sort of have done so. Carrying through on trying to set boundaries a little bit better than I used to. And I always had that they weren't allowed to text me or contact me after, or if they didn't get a hold of me before 10 at night, there was no guarantee I was going to get back to them. I think I'm probably going to put that at like much earlier and spend much more time setting boundaries as far as what amount of time I spend with athletes during the day. That's probably the biggest difference that I will take moving forward compared to what I did before. It's just, we always talk about trying to, as coaches, have those boundaries and separate our professional life and our personal life, and make sure that we're looking after ourselves so that we can look after athletes. And we just, as coaches, I think everyone in this room probably is not always good at making sure that we're taken care of before we take care of athletes. So I think that's probably one of the biggest things that I'm hoping, fingers crossed, to try and continue as I move into new normal.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. A really, really good one. How about Derek?
I think just leaning on some of the technology so that I don't have to make unnecessary trips. And for me, the trips have been like even just local trips, but also I as I got older, I hated flying before the pandemic. So I'm going to look for any opportunity to not fly somewhere, because the process is just horrible. I remember when I was young and I used to look forward to like flying to Saskatoon with you, Carmen, and but yeah, if I don't have to get on a plane, then I'm going to do whatever I can to avoid doing that and find some other way of doing it.
That was only because you were going to be staying at the Bessborough.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, crashing on the roof.
Feel for you, Derek.
What's that?
Saskatoon, I feel for you. Flying back to Saskatoon. If there was an entertainment under Carmen, change coach. Get a new coach.
Yeah,
Hey.
you could have had less coach, and you could have taken a bus from Calgary to Saskatoon. It's a lot more fun
Exactly.
than flying.
That would be more fun than flying.
Oh,
No
way more fun.
checking in.
I can remember one of those trips to Saskatoon, and we stopped at the Calgary airport, and Thelma, right, her and Jennifer Mobby got off the plane, and oopsie, they didn't quite get back on the plane by the time we left. So, anyway,
Yeah, or the pole vaulters arrived with their poles cut in half by the airline. Yeah.
oh yeah, lots of fun times. Mike, how about you?
Well, I think like certainly like Larry alluded to the fitness part. I found when I was coaching face to face with people that typically I would get in some kind of shape, sort of, well, not round because that's a shape too, but not counting that. But getting to some kind of fitness levels, like fall and then through the winter, and then spring would roll around, spring and summer, and I was just like, forget about it. So it was a cycle of getting in something I thought was a decent fitness level, and then for another half of the year, or just sort of falling apart. So I think really, staying with that is that's been something that's been easier to do here. But I think from this, I think, especially because, as I said, I've already had to use, internet, phone, etc., in staying in touch, particularly with Jess and Maria. So one thing with this is really underscored that I need to have more regular and ongoing communication with them. It's just too easy to let things coast and assume everything's going well when you can't see people. And that's, as we know, that's not necessarily the case. Just no news is not necessarily good news. It's just no news, and you don't know what it is. And secondly, I think the having established more contact with other coaches, I really think that's something that I need to pursue. It's not healthy working in isolation, and unfortunately, in our sport, that's often sort of how we do end up working.
Right. Yeah. Okay. All right. As we move to the next question, I'm just going to ask one question for two of you, and then I'll switch it to a different one. But let's go with Larry first. And what has been your biggest challenge that you faced in your coaching career, and how did you handle it?
I'm gonna default to the same topic that I've been talking about. The biggest challenge has been putting up boundaries and taking care of myself. I think that that's been one of the biggest things, is just spending so much time, because you can always be working on something, whether it's your professional development or your training plans, as well as the 8 to 10 to 12 hours a day with athletes. It just can become overwhelming, and especially when, as all of us know, we're making well below minimum wage. In fact, we're probably down below 10 cents per hour when we total everything together. That there's that fine line that we have to draw. And I think it really, I did a project with, with the On the Podium and NCCP coaching program, where we were doing mentoring and talking about personal well-being, basically just as the pandemic started. And it was funny because at that time we were talking about things that I wasn't doing very well for myself. And a lot of that was taking care of yourself, not getting the sleep that you wanted. The same things that we talk about with athletes, right? Sleep, hydration, exercise, etc., and recovery. And that wasn't happening for me. And I think that's always been a challenge. I think it's probably a challenge for most coaches to kind of to do that. And I'm still, and as far as how I'm handling it, I'm still beginning to handle it. And I'm just learning to be able to draw some of those boundaries and trying to keep them as I go forward. That's my challenge, and where I'm hoping to stay with it moving forward, for sure.
All right, very good. Yeah, I bet there's a lot of coaches that could learn from that. Les, how about you? What's been your biggest challenge that you faced during your career, and how did you handle it?
Well, I approaching 50 years of coaching, so some so far back I never remember. what the challenges were at the time. Mostly my challenges were the failures, and but resulted in a lot more learning. And I know now that the greatest failures provided me with the most learning. I learned that experts are not always right. As a matter of fact, oftentimes they are not. We were scared shitless in airplanes, they're going to die from the heat. Same as in Atlanta. Same as in everywhere, okay? And there were just statistical issues. We didn't die from the heat. Beijing was also supposed to kill us with the smog. No, there's none. But so I think we have to. What I learned is I learned to trust myself a little bit better. Okay, try to kind of put aside all the other things, influence that's coming. Disappointments are very educational. If you think of it, disappointments are very educational. You know, if you're always doing well, you will remember them thing. Okay, so I think it's always look at that. You know, and really the definition expert is who made all the mistakes in a very narrow field. And I made a lot of mistakes in a very narrow field of track and field. And that's why I'm an expert in track. Okay, that's took me a while to get here. Okay, not that easy. Takes time, pay a lot of very high price for my expertise. This is my age. Okay, but overall, I think it's have to good. But I think that learning to trust and make sure that you allow your instinct sometimes to work over what somebody tells you that's going to be like this and this. And I you know, though I have no regrets necessarily, but today I could do better in '96 Atlanta or 2004 in Athens or 2012 or 2008 in Beijing. Today's knowledge, okay?
Yeah.
Carmen, can I just build on that and ask Les a question? I think that might be interesting for some of the people to hear Les talk about. And I think I've probably been there for some of what Les would consider failures. But I think, Les, if you could expand on what you considered failures, considering the fact that, as you say, you always try to learn from each of those, that in a sense, maybe it's not really a failure, it's just a difficult learning experience that was disappointing. But perhaps if you could define what you considered failures and what you then were able to take away from it.
Well, okay, so give you a prime example, Atlanta 1996. Michael was pretty much considered a medal contender. Some consider even more than just one medal, but the top medal. Reality is we got told that we have to drink and drink and drink because they're going to dehydrate it. And reality is we weren't, and he was just totally blown away. He actually had water poisoning at the end of the day, okay? So what I'm saying is that today I wouldn't allow this to happen. The learning kind of took me a step beyond and say, okay, no. Okay, guys, we don't have to chicken soup every morning, okay? Just to fine. You get your whatever, you know, cereals and something. But the reality is that I allow a lot of things to be driven away from it. So failure means results aren't there. We're still a result-oriented business. We all know that. Let's not fool ourselves. Results are not there. We're not happy. I'm not happy when failing. Failing is, it's a funny way, you know, a failing project, not a failing person. Okay, but nevertheless, we still rely on the fact that we have to have success. And I think he was primed to be on the podium, and all those health issues, which was somewhat precipitated by, you know, intravenous after the first day, which already his head looked like a watermelon because so hydrated. And we allowed that to happen. That's what I'm saying. That's how I'm looking at. And then progressively you move forward and start to learn from it. And I really believe that the learning is invaluable. But sometimes it's too late by that. You can't change what happened before. But the next step is to help. Okay. But
So if you were to go back to 96, and we've kind of had some of these discussions previously, we've been roommates enough times that we've had deep night conversations.
I remember that.
Discussing them.
I don't remember.
Yeah. Would you tell yourself in 1996 to go with your gut, or would you what would you be doing with trying to have some educated experimentation at that time?
I would allow my instinct to take place much more than what it is now, what it was that time. I was so heavily influenced by science, and I do believe coaching is an art and science, but I am an artist and relying on the science. But the science sometimes mislead you in a point where they're so rigid about certain things. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, I could have done differently. I would have told him, Michael, get out the 400, you finished running shitty. Okay, just get on the bus. Let's go back to the safe house with McGinnis. Okay, it's basically it just don't get the intravenous, don't go anything, because it was just basically killed him, water poisoning. Not killed him literally, but you know what I mean. So that's what I'm saying. A learning process going forward. But I would probably allow a lot more instinct to take place. I mean, we all base everything on our knowledge and experience, but instincts sometimes have to kick in.
Yeah.
That's why this book of How We Decide is an incredibly interesting book about decision making in life. From picking ice cream to throwing the football from a quarterback, Tom Brady, to a receiver.
Okay, let's flip this question over and look at your biggest or best achievement. And what are you most proud of, Mike, and why is that?
My goodness, I was getting all ready to talk about disappointments.
Well, yeah, well, only two people get to talk about disappointments.
Okay, I would like to just chirp in one little bit there. Just, I think, staying with this sort of theme that sort of, if I knew then what I knew now kind of thing, and unfortunately, we don't know, we don't have control over when we're going to learn something. But the good thing is that down the road, you can apply it to subsequent athletes. So I think that's a part of it, the way Larry sort of worded it, saying, and not so much a failure, but a difficult learning experience. And yeah, had a few of those. So sorry, can you fire that question to me again? What was the wording of it?
Yeah, what's been your biggest or best achievement as a coach so far? I mean, there's, I'm sure, plenty more down the road, but what are you most proud of, and why?
Oh my gosh. Just like when I had to do what didn't go so well, I had several. I think a lot of things here that really do stand out for me. And actually, I didn't plan this one because I'm going to go with whatever pops in my head. So I think one thing that I guess highlight to that point in my coaching time was certainly the biggest thing that ever happened. And it was another case of being able to apply stuff I didn't know before to get a good result. And that's being at the Prefontaine in 2004. Lindy Elmore was running the 1500, and Athletics Canada had this really interesting policy at the time of athletes needing 2A standards in a given year to make the Olympics. And Lindy was, at that point, was the kind of athlete where I knew that if she didn't perform to a certain level, I knew that she didn't make, for example, the Olympic team, that was going to be on me, not on her. Definitely, she had the ability to do that. And, my own coaching experience to that stage had been coaching, at a club in Kelowna, mostly, high school age kids. 2 years in Calgary with a senior men's group. So that definitely a learning curve there for a couple of years. And then going back to Calgary. And so when Melindy had elected to go to Stanford, obviously we stayed in touch and worked with her when she came home and that kind of thing. And then she was getting ready to graduate, and I said, we need to sit down and take a look at where you're going to train, and sort of went through the places that I thought were the best options. So in Victoria, you had, Windgren Trotsky, and you had the bike set up, and in the Lower Mainland, you had the Valley Royals. You had Mike Lonergan was working with Leah Pels, and Doug Clement was coaching, Jerry Swan was coaching. So, and she knew them, some better than others, certainly their athletes. And then she said, well, what about Calgary? And I said, well, which is where I was. And I said, well, that's interesting. I said, I can guarantee you, coming to Calgary, you may not get faster. You will get a lot tougher. You'll define what wind is. You'll redefine that just much. I think Larry would say, yeah, come to Lethbridge and you'll really see what wind is. So when she made that decision to come to Calgary, then obviously I felt a lot of pressure in that sense. because again, if she didn't advance, I felt that was going to be on me. So fast forward to the Prefontaine, and she ran 4:04. So she ran Olympic standard. She ran down one of the subsequently caught for doping Russians, which is a pretty impressive run all around. And I just remember that feeling it's like somebody had lifted about 50 tons off my shoulder. Like I didn't know how to react. To sort of walk to kind of a corner of the area to sort of breathe. It was like, oh my God, like what just happened? And what really stands out is I looked over and here's Marek Jezerek just beaming, like he was almost jumping up and down. He's pointing at the track, pointing at her, pointing at the time, just like, oh my God, this is amazing. And you know, at that point I was thinking, yeah, like it's sort of, all of this stuff has sort of come together. You know, as a coach, I did connect the dots well enough that, you know, in that sense, didn't let her down. She was able to run super fast with the training we were doing. And yeah, I think to that point, that was the moment. It's sort of like, that's kind of wow moment, like this is happening.
Wow, yeah, that must have been a holy doodle. Good for you. And well, and then where did she run the second standard? You said back then you had to do it.
Yes. Well, a little story there. So she goes over and she's running in Crystal Palace, and Dame Kelly was running, and they went out, and Lindy knows she's got to run under 4:06, and out they go, and it's just a pedestrian pace, and it's going to be a sit and kick race, and of course Kelly blows everybody away, and Lindy's, you know, she's a very nice lady, but she's not shy. So the girls were all, you know, cooling down afterwards, and she just, you know, said to a few, it's like, what's going on? Like, you guys set that race up for her. Like, you know, why do you guys just sit there? You know, she's going to kick you. You know, we came here to run fast. And somebody looked at her and said, well, you know, what are you complaining about? You've got your race standard. She goes, yeah, but I need two. So they couldn't wrap their heads around that themselves. But anyhow, luckily she got into Rome, and she ran actually turned out to be her lifetime best of 4:02. And she was good to go. Then ironically, her and Carmen Doma ran standard again, running 1 and 2 in the Olympic trials in Victoria. So
wow.
So she had unfortunately, by the time she got over to Europe, she had a virus and didn't run as well as she had the rest of the year. But
still, that's exciting.
It was a great year.
Derek, how about you? What has been your biggest or best coaching achievement so far that you're most proud of, and why is that?
Oh, geez, it's probably coaching in sport and still affording a house in Vancouver. You know, I don't know. It's so hard to say, but I do like what everybody said here, like what Les was saying about just trusting your instincts. And I think getting out from underneath stupid people is like a really good advice for younger people, because I use my phone, and like whenever you type something in and the phone's trying to autocorrect you, that's what I liken it to. It's like, no, this is the word I want, and the phone's trying to tell you something else. And I think that's been probably the biggest thing, is other people trying to tell you what to do, and trusting your instincts is probably the best thing you could do. And I think when I've done that, things have worked out well. But you know how it is when you're working for somebody else or for an institution, Carmen, as you know, sometimes stupid stuff happens and you're like, I got to get out from under this. And that's probably the best thing I did. So.
Oh, okay. I think I know what you're talking about.
Those of you listening and here, I just want to make sure that you understand that you don't have to be old to be a good coach, nor do you have to be making tons of mistakes. But don't be afraid to make mistakes. It's part of the learning process. Okay? If you always tell you're great, you learn nothing. And that's the sense of the school program. Every kid is fantastically smart. Baloney, they're not that smart. They're a bunch of useless shreds, okay? So just tell them that learn from your mistakes. Sorry, you have to jump in.
Okay, I'm going to switch it over to coaching education. And as we all know, it's more than just the NCCP program. But Mike and Les, I'm going to ask you two this question, but you know, you're two of the lead coach developers here in Alberta. What other methods of professional development would you advise coaches to explore?
For me, I think over time, what's really stood out to be, I think, crucial, and this I think this webinar system or series here is a really good example. I think mentorship is huge. I think it's the key. I think any coach can learn from any other coach, but we don't often seem to take the time to do that enough. And a lot of times too, I think when we do, we tend to talk with people who think like we do rather than challenging our assumptions and looking at different perspectives. So Jess said, or Les said, like not being afraid to make mistakes. There's no one right way to get the coaching job done. It's certainly some wrong ways, and of course you got examples of those. But I think that learning from each other, we're each other's greatest resources. And there was a time like people would sort of felt that they had secrets, that there was the secret workout or this system or whatever. And it's not rocket science, that it's not as complicated as I think some people in the past tried to make it. So really it's a more a matter of talking things through, looking, and what people are doing. And I think a big part of it is understanding the why, like why is that person doing this, and understand. So rather than being critical, getting an understanding of that's what they're doing this for. Okay. And you can then choose to say, okay, I understand that idea, but that's not something I want to buy into. Or, if you don't understand it, then find out. I think before you can really say that you can challenge something, you need to understand what you're challenging. You can't just put it down because it's not familiar with it's not something you're familiar with. We've got Athletics Canada is setting up a coaching mentorship program starting this fall. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I know from doing the coaching evaluations that I've done that, and if it's any indication, I'm going to learn at least as much from the coaches taking the program for mentorship as they're likely to learn from me. I think another thing is finding and attending presentations by knowledgeable coaches. I think Les and Larry both alluded to that example earlier. It's really something I've benefited from. And most recently, it's been fun to talk with some of my mature, older, shall we say, athletes. For example, say Melindy and Jess, because they both started coaching themselves. So Jess coaching online, Melindy online, and also with UBCO. So it's really interesting to see how they've applied their own lives as athletes to develop their own coaching models and styles. I mean, they're both as Olympians, have got insights and experiences that I'm never going to have. I'm never going to run in Olympics, and never have. And so they've got that, but they've also got who they are as people. They've got their education, their training, their background, and it's been really cool to see how what they're doing as coaches and see what I can learn from that.
Yeah, for sure.
I think we all agree on the leadership component. It's very important. I think we all agree on that one in general. I think most of us in life. I also always said that you got to figure out a way that somebody who's coaching you. Doesn't matter what age you are or what level you are. You can be level 15 NCCP. It doesn't matter. You still need somebody you can rely on and turn to. And I benefited from Gary Winkler and some others through the years that I say coaching. So when I came home for a meet when things didn't go too well or anywhere else, I can call him and say, hey, what's happening? That kind of stuff. So I think I would encourage that kind of interaction. It's very important. Mentorship is important, but mentorship have to be non-judgmental. And sometimes it's hard to do it with judgment. It's like, I'm not going to tell you what I'm doing because you're going to be critical. No, I'm not critical. Okay, it's just somehow to overcome the judgmental part of mentorship. And I'm looking forward to what John LaFranco tried to put together. I have some concerns, but that's just for me.
Yeah, if I can just jump in for a second, Mark. I think to add on top of that, I think it's surround yourself with great people. And I think that those people who will support and challenge you. And I think some of the biggest learning times for me was that 2008 to 2014-ish range, where there was, Les, myself, there was about between 12 and 14 of us that gathered in Phoenix every year. And we sat in a room and presented and challenged each and every one of us in the room. And I think that was some of the most important times. And Gary Winkler was obviously in that room at the same time. And I would say that, having had the opportunity to call Les and Gary friends and supporters and mentors all at the same time has been a huge impact on my coaching life. And I can't say enough about how you need to really make sure that you get yourself in the room with people who are knowledgeable, experienced, and have a good philosophy on what it is to be a coach. And they're going to support you and hopefully also challenge you, because I think that's how we rise to the top as coaches, is if we're challenged, but in a way that we're also supported. And I think that's like I said, some of the best learning opportunities for myself have been when Les has approached me. We've been working together with another athlete, and Les is always the voice, and if I was the eyes, it was always going through Les to the athletes. But there was a respect there that we were, supporting, but at the same time challenging each other. He would challenge me why I'm saying that they should be trying to do X, Y, or Z, but at the same time, it was a process that was cordial and supportive at the same time.
You influenced me quite a bit, Larry. There's definitely the process. And when I say trust myself, I also trusted you. And trusted, so it was a combination of overall trust of communication. It was good. No, I remember that.
And that's what I'm getting at. I think that you have to be able to have that trust so that you can have the challenging, but the support at the same time. That it's not about you as a person. It's about the ideas and the education that you're trying to discuss and move forward with.
It's also the same time, I think, would be important for people to understand that creating training environment in a joint setting is very beneficial. Doesn't have to be national team driven. You can create a club or whatever, couple of clubs together, do some work, because that's so different, because people need to be exposed to different environment. Athletes need to be exposed to different environment. And I think we're missing out on that. We're waiting for Messiah to come down and put it together for us.
For sure. And to jump on that, I think that people get stuck on that it has to be with the same event group, and I would disagree that it's.
I totally disagree. Yeah. I don't want
I was just going to say that too, that you can learn from people from other event groups. You don't have to stay in your own little box.
Larry, I don't know distance runners.
Well,
so Mike can't come.
Nothing to learn from them.
They're in a league all their own, those distance guys.
I know.
All right, I've got a new question, and Derek, this is directed towards you. But there's so much, so-called expert information out there on the internet that can be, totally overwhelming. It's like information overload. How do you sort out the legit stuff from the fluffy stuff? In other words, how do you weed out the crap that's just well marketed, but it's not very good?
Oh, geez. I think the guys answered that already. Is like, you got to surround yourself with good people, because it's just information. It's not really knowledge or wisdom that you're getting from these sources. So, you have to have somebody that helps you kind of gauge whether or not that information is valuable, and then it goes to the next level. And they said everything, right there. And I would even talk to other sporting coaches. Talk to swim coaches. I've worked with swimming, cycling, weightlifting, all at the Olympic level, speed skating, whatever, anything where there's like physiological sort of rules around what you have to do. And you can get some ideas, and they can share their stories and case studies. And then, look beyond sport too, and look into engineering or, technology, and talk to other people who are doing really well at what they do. But just pulling information off the internet, or people always say to me, like, what book should I read to be a good sprint coach? I'm like, I don't know, Les, do you know of a good sprint coach book? I don't.
Yeah. Smolinski's 1970.
Yeah. The better ones.
As basic as you can get, still good. No, I'm just joking.
Yeah. So I just, you have to have that network of people that you can lean on, to help vet information. Because if you're just pulling information, it's not going to be very helpful. There's no context. So
what I think, sort of intro, what I think it's when you look at some of the publications, you have to look at three categories. Is it noise, which means like research fueled by own interest, or for publication, or for thesis, or other things, okay? Second is interesting, research initiated by performance. basically good data, but provided by only one single attempt by a single athlete, okay? And lastly, is impactful, is impacting performance, initiative in the support team, data collected on continuous and training and competition way. So those are the things you try to ask the questions when you look at the material. And I think it's important to see that, because otherwise there's so many things. Hey, about a million years ago, I read an article about underwater pole vaulting. Training underwater pole vaulting. And we did it actually when we were in Arizona, the pool, get the pole that
1998.
Yeah, it just so, but you can get hooked up and oh yeah, it's working. Yeah, sure, it's working. It does nothing for you, okay? But anyway, you get a good laugh out of it. You can suntan at the same time, so it's Arizona. Don't do underwater pole vaulting in Calgary on the Bow River.
Funny, I know a pole vault coach that did believe in that, and they did a lot of it, but I won't say who that person is. Okay, hey, I've got a couple other questions, but let's just go in a slightly new direction and let's check in with Nick and see what kind of questions have been typed in by those that are attending our webinar.
Let's just open it up yet. If you haven't typed in, feel free to. If you want to just speak, if you go down to the reactions and just raise your hand or just throw on your mic and start talking, because then, yeah.
Quiet crowd.
It is a quiet crowd. I'll kick it off. How is this for anyone? How would you guys recommend? Oh, Deanne has a question.
Deanne's got a question.
You know what? Deanne, go ahead. Deanne, go ahead.
But Deanne is muted.
Oh yeah.
Deanne has to turn her mic on.
Thanks,
Okay.
Mike.
Good job, Dee.
Can you hear me?
We can.
We can
Okay,
hear you
so-
now.
God, it's so wonderful to see all of you, and I just love your Canadian accents, I have to say. High five on that. So
We like yours too.
Oh, thank you. It's changed a lot. I don't know if we've reached this part of the conversation yet, but I do have some questions on technology. So I don't know if we're going to head in that department, but completely thank you so much for the reminder of having great mentors. I think that's really important. And actually, I probably consider every single one of you as a mentor, because I know that I could call you up and ask you for any advice, and I know that you would very freely and willingly give it. So thank you so much. I coach athletes between the ages of 12 and 18, and technology is a big deal. So what do you guys use, and like, is there any use for it in distance running? Mike, you're probably the right person to ask, because I know the sprinters probably have more use for it in terms of 40-yard dash times, but do you have any advice or anywhere that you could send us for that?
Well, I'm not the Mr. Technology, and I had to start answering before Les made a comment about distance running and technology, so I don't want to let him cut in. A couple of things. One of I think is as simple, probably very low tech, but I think it's free, or else $1.99, but an app called Coach's Eye, which using on the iPad, it's really super fast in terms of being able to just video what you're seeing, play it back. You can put the little lines, dashes, dots, whatever you want to put on there. But I find that's one, it's my level. I can understand it. I can use it. I was talking a couple of weeks ago with one of my athletes about just the use of GPS watch and I guess the pros and cons of that. So I know maybe you're looking at technology to help. The two caveats I'd throw out there is, one is kids get so dependent on technology. So particularly, as I say, the GPS watch thing, I think the risk is that you become a slave to it, because it's going to read. And if you take the next level and let's say you're on Strava and you post everything there, then you become a slave to that, because you're thinking, you're setting yourself up to be judged on whatever you do. So I think that where I go with that is for the younger athletes in that window you're working with is really, I see technology, especially social media, as being probably one of their biggest detriments, because they're just, they either feel that need to put it out there, and they don't realize they put it out there when things are going well. people are going to put stuff out when they're not doing so well. And I think that can have a real negative consequence. So I think useful technology, a simple little thing like Coach's Eye, that app, and then just the warning about relying too much on going too much into social media or using like something like GPS where it's going to sort of run your life.
Diane is so,
sorry,
Diane
is that
is so good to see you.
Hi,
I haven't seen you for a long time.
I know. Hi.
I can answer some question on technology because I'm expert on technology.
Mhm.
What are you laughing about?
Hey, so Deanne, everybody here knows you as one of the Canada's best ever 800-meter runners.
And long jumper.
I was just going to say, but Deanne, what did you do before you became a middle distance runner?
Yeah, I was laughing when you said, yeah, you can do other things. Yes, I was a long jumper. And actually, Carmen and I have a thing going that I'm going to be doing long jump at the 2023 Masters Indoor Championships in Edmonton. So
Wow.
full circle.
Need a coach?
She's
Need a
got
coach?
one, Les.
Have you got one already? I'm the best.
The funny thing is I coach the middle school athletes long jump, but I coach the high school athletes middle distance. And what I run into is this whole GPS, minutes per mile, pace type stuff that I think Mike was talking about. So the Coach's Eye app, what do you use that for? Like in terms
Video.
of coaching and feedback? And when you say video, are you talking about technique, like running efficiency? Okay.
So I find it in my particular case, so obviously you can look at it, something I can pass on to physios in terms of what the running's looking like. With Maria doing steeplechase, obviously, with the hurdle part, because me not being the hurdle guru, I get to bring it home and show it to Brenda. And she can say, oh, okay, this is what you need to do. So I think in that sense that running form, I mean, it's a lot easier for an athlete, I think, to self-correct if you can say, you can tell them 15 times, this is what you need to do, this, need to do this. And then they look and go, hey, look at me, I'm doing this. And yeah, you're right. So now what do you need to do to fix it? So just along those lines, nothing really complicated, but I think it is useful.
Actually, just let me jump in there because technology is killing us. Basically, we're so dependent on technology, both Coach's Eyes or Dartfish. I learned from an East German guy 50 million years ago, right? Basically, the filming is not like TikTok. Okay, it's got to be the angles, the distance. I mean, came to Goetze's 96, Phil Michael Smith, all the jumps, everything is measure distance, how far the camera is from the actual angles are not the simple as people think it is. Okay, yeah, you give some feedback. Second thing is neuroscience tells you shouldn't watch yourself too much. You should watch others to do better than you are. Okay, basically, that's there's a couple of things, but basically, I think in coaching, and you learn to evaluate physical abilities without technology. The feel for the event, how they move, that's have to be learned as a coach to evaluate yourself, not looking at pictures. It's Disney effect, I call it. Disney effect. People watch themselves, oh, gee, my head is messy. Okay, who cares? And I've seen that before with girls. So like, hey, look at your shot put, glide through. Oh, it looks terrible. Why? Because my hair is hanging on the left side. I don't care, okay? So you gotta be careful how much technology you use for that kind of a stuff. The other technologies worries me is the cell phone use. Because cell phone basically operates on infrared frequency spectrum, which is the same as microwave. And kids sleeping with cell phone in their bed. Might as well stick your head in the microwave and sleep like that.
So is it fairly accurate to say that none of you, I would regard you guys as all high performance coaches. I'm a high school coach, middle school, high school coach. Is it pretty safe to say that you're not even using an app in terms of scheduling or planning or periodization?
No,
No.
I'll here because I probably, unless Derek Scott is also probably that, but I would say out of all of us, I'm probably the most plugged in with technology, and I'm almost too much of a crutch relying on it these days. So I use, I think you missed the previous seminar we did, but I use athlete monitoring and use it heavily for it. Now it's a per athlete charge. but it organizes my life. But that's because I work with an awful lot of athletes, and I work with athletes that are in environments that are not always in my day-to-day environment. So that's one that I use for everything, including my IST support. My IST have access to it. So they are, anything that they are dealing with an athlete gets put into athlete monitoring, and I have access to it right away, so that I know things that are going on, as well as we collaborate on any kind of a prehab or rehab program with the athletes. And then it's also got my questionnaire as far as, daily health, amount of sleep, those kind of things that they have to actually go through, answer that before they can get to the workout, which is appearing on the app as well. So, and then within that, I have everything from using my Gym Aware, which is a velocity-based tethering program that I use in the weight room to control how much weight that they're lifting. It's one of the best ways I've found to control guys, especially with trying to compete in the weight room and lifting as much as they can, because they have to, it's tied into a velocity instead of the amount of weight. And there's a velocity-based curve that, I mean, we can go into at some point if you want, as far as how I use that. And then that's far more efficient for me, because I can, and it is for them as well, because there's an iPad that sits on the squat rack, for example, and it gives them a feedback if they're in the zone right away. And the most efficient feedback is that which is done closest to when something is performed. So if they're performing it, they actually can hear a ding at the same time. If they're in the zones, let's say they were doing squats that were supposed to be performed at a certain velocity, then that's giving them automatic feedback at the time. From that to using devices where I'm measuring hurdle contact times or flight times, we'll use that as well. And that all ties into athlete monitoring so that I can see graph and use that. And I actually used to use Gary Winkler's program back in the day, and he's probably the master of data collection when it comes to hurdling, the stuff that he used to collect and use on a day-to-day basis. And so I'm highly reliant on it, but at the same time, I also agree with Les that I don't do a lot of videoing. It has to be done at a specific time with a specific purpose, not just for the sake of doing video. Because I find that it is exactly that. Watching yourself too much perform something poorly leads to poor performance. And you need to really work on your modeling of what athletes are viewing and seeing, so that they're getting a visual that's, as Les said, the neural feedback is such that they're seeing something that's performed properly, as opposed to repetition of something that's performed poorly. There's no different than that than being in the circle, let's say, or on the runway, where they're repeating things over and over. It's just reinforcing that. So as I said, I'm kind of almost the extreme, but I also rely on trying to have athletes take advantage of the feel of the event and learning things that way, which is an important component.
Using the technology rightly, Larry, I know that because I know you, okay? So it's not the point what I'm saying, but sometimes people get into technology just filming when they go to the toilet too, okay? So it's just like, just don't have to film everything, okay? I work with a pole vaulter. I'm not going to mention her name because it's not fair, okay? But she just, every jump she did have to be filmed. Why? Nothing changed from one to the other.
And I would agree that athletes have other athletes now with phones and videoing almost every single attempt, and it's becomes too reliant, and they use it as a crutch, if it's even a crutch, on trying to determine what is right or wrong, instead of using what their kinesthetic feel is to determine that.
All right,
Okay.
we've got one more question. So I want to end on this one. I'll give this last word to Les. This is directed at you. So you've talked a little bit to us before about learning from your past experiences. Is there anything that you learned within the last year that would make you want to go back? Like, what will you change if you could go back to the start of this pandemic?
Right now?
Yeah.
I would go back to much more basic training. I would continue to do a lot more basic developmental body movements, okay? Stay on the grass longer. We tend to go into specific technical work with a lot of people too soon. I'm quite happy to do a lot more general training. And that would be that. I wrote a note about when the questions came up. I said, like, this is what message I would say. Please don't rush into the specificity. Spend longer time on the general part of development. It's going to benefit you healthy, fit, healthier, lot less injuries. Right? That's the biggest thing I learned.
Perfect. Awesome. Does anyone else want to throw something in there quickly? I'll give one last response to the coaches.
Yeah, I would probably echo what Les says is we have a tendency of getting away from the basics too quickly. And even in the throws where we consider, that we always need to be throwing. I think sometimes coaches spend way too much time worrying about throwing, especially at the younger ages. We have to treat them as an athlete first, then a thrower. And it's the same across any event, I believe, that you need to really look at them as an athlete first and develop those athletic abilities long before you start treating them with the specific event activities. And that doesn't mean you can't be specific with athletes at a young age. It's just that the majority of the time should probably be geared towards developing them as an athletic ability and their core abilities from that perspective.
Awesome. Thanks, Larry.
Okay. Actually, I have one last question, and I'm going to target this to Derek, because Derek, you've always been my go-to guy as far as technology goes. But if you had to narrow things down, what do you think would be the most important form of technology when it comes to working with the athletes that you work with?
I agree with what everybody said, and not just to be politically correct, but I think you have to be careful sometimes to be like the old guy, screaming, "Get off my lawn." Otherwise, you're going to be the guy that's like paying for your groceries with a check, right? So I have to figure out how to use Bitcoin at some point. But I think the biggest useful thing for me has been athlete engagement. Any technology that I can use to create excitement or engagement around coming to practice or seeing them do something has been more useful than any analysis tools that I use. And if I hate to say it, but track and field is way behind in terms of promoting itself and valuing itself compared to other sports that I work with. Like if you're in the NFL or the NHL or the NBA, it's all fluff and glitz and all that, but they're getting more people involved in their sport. So you can't be boring. You have to be exciting. You have to be engaging. And that's how you're going to get people into your sport. You get more people into your sport, you're going to get better performances and you get more sponsorships and all that. So I think we have to find a balance to use technology to make it look like, our sport is really exciting. And I want to get involved as a young person because I have kids and they're great at track, but it's not the most exciting thing. The thing that they like about track is a social component. But other than that, there's not a lot of great meets. There's not a lot of great, stuff on TV about track. So it's at the bottom. I hate to say it. So at the grassroots level, find ways to be more engaging. Otherwise, we're going to be watching ultimate frisbee and bodybuilding and skateboarding at the Olympics. So figure it out, right? So
I would actually just add in that I think that Derek's hit on an important point is that us old fuddy-duddies had a tendency of not wanting to embrace phones. And I think that when I finally gave in and allowed that to happen, the communication, it's not the ideal communication from my perspective. I would much prefer doing it in person, but a lot of athletes are far more comfortable to ask the questions they want to ask using their phone and texting you at 10 o'clock at night than they do in the session when you're with them. And for whatever reason that is, and many people have different reasons why that is. And I think that has been one of the best things I've finally embraced, was just trying to allow it as a communication tool. And I was getting more and better information out of athletes to determine where they're at in their training when they were able to, when I didn't, disallow that kind of communication and started to embrace it a little bit more.
According to Dr. Charles Samuels, after 8 o'clock should go electronic.
What's that, Les?
According to Dr. Charles Samuels,
Yeah, yeah.
the sleep doctor, nothing after 8 o'clock at night should go electronic.
Yes.
And I shut
Yeah.
them computer at 8 o'clock. It will be in about 30 minutes, and then that's it. And I'm fine. And the girls learn to not to bug me about it, and I still communicate with them. I know you can teach people differently, but I know what you're saying. But I don't have to change because technology, because Bill Gates tell me I have to be like this. Okay? No, I don't. I can still run my life the way I think it's important.
No,
But
Bill's got the
technology-
microchip in your vaccine anyways, Les, so he'll know what you're doing.
All right, well, it's after 8 o'clock and here we are using technology. So I just want to say thank you guys so very, very much. Like I said earlier, it's been awesome reconnecting with you, and I look forward to doing more so as we move forward and get out of this lockdown. And yeah, some of these topics, maybe this might be our last webinar as far as this particular series goes, but who's to say that next month we don't start up a new one? We'll see what happens. But thanks for and to all the attendees too for coming out. We really appreciate your support, and look forward to seeing all of you outside soon.
There's 3
Thanks,
pages.
Carmen. Thanks, James. And Beth.
That includes presenters. So.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
Thanks for doing
everyone.
this, Carmen
Thanks,
and
Beth.
company. Good to see you, Dee.
Indeed.
And Dee. Deanne Cummings.
Yeah, coming.
Yeah.
What's she doing there?
Coach in high school
Where?
and middle school.
Where's Brenda?
Oh, she's in the background asking how Deanne's doing.
Yeah, hear her in the background, put her in the foreground.
Okay, come over and you can see Deanne.